One of these days I'm gonna edit out these intros where I walk in and sit down. I don't know why people like me to keep them in. It's kind of strange. Okay. God, I hate iPads. What a pain. What a pain iPads are. Kind of useless media consumption device. Anyway, just made a couple notes, things I wanted to say on the 70-300mm new Fujifilm lens. I'd like to make a reminder to people on a couple of things. I'm a big Fujifilm fan, that I've actually given hell, so to say, to a few Fujifilm lenses that deserved it. The last one was the 50mm f1, and everybody said I was crazy for not really liking it and saying it was a poor performer and good ambient illumination, and it is. And the other people that everybody trusts said it was the worst lens of the year. So, also too, and of course, this has been a matter of note or record for years now on my Fujifilm book, which is in the 3rd edition. The link is below. I'm not a fan of the 100-400mm Fujifilm lens. I own that lens, and also to the 50-140, which this is not really comparable to. I'll talk about that in a second. Also to the 55-200mm. It is comparable, and I'd like to make a mention of that. I've tested and owned a lot of different variants over the decades of 70-300mm lenses. Mostly so that from Nikon, their Nikkor line of 70-300mm of various different varieties. Anyway, this is it. This is 70-300. I've actually done a lot of testing, posted image samples on Facebook and Instagram. I've tested this lens a whole lot more than I thought I would, because it doesn't take me that long to find out what a lens is and whether it's any good and what it's best for, but I've actually been enjoying this. Took it to the farm. I took it everywhere today. Also took it to a skate park today. $800 lens. Excuse me, I said 800mm for a second. $800 for this lens, 17 elements. It's extremely lightweight. This is, and I own nearly every Fujifilm X-mount lens, except for the 18mm, which I'm no fan of. Easily the second fastest autofocusing Fujifilm lens after that of the 200mm f2. It's actually quite astonishing. 5.5 stops of optical image stabilization, and you really do notice it on this lens too. I was using it on the XE4, but mostly on the XT4, versus this and the 100-400 and the 55-200. This is a lot smaller, much more lightweight, and a lot faster than that of the 55-200. Is it comparable? I mean, the 55-200. Actually, my position is that it has worse bokeh, and this is not a portraiture lens, and neither is the 55-200. They're meant to be sports action, wildlife action lenses. But I actually love the cotton candy bokeh and the out of focus elements produced on this lens. And the image samples are out there everywhere on Flickr, and also too the ones I posted on Instagram and Facebook. As I said, I've never been a fan of the 100-400, which has not only nasty bokeh, which isn't important since it's meant to be a wildlife sports action lens. You know, it's huge, it's heavy. I don't like the way it renders. I'm used to a lot better lenses. I mean, no offense to Fujifilm, but I'm used to, spoiled by really, really good telephoto zooms like the 200-500 Nikkor. It's a perfectly adequate lens, but this is a much better lens, even though it doesn't have the same focal range and it's not as fast of a lens as the 100-400. A much better lens than the 100-400 is, and that's a matter of record, like I said, from my Fujifilm book, where I don't rate that lens highly, and I don't personally like it all that much. 50-140, which I also have, is huge. You know, it's ideal for weddings and portraiture. It's not really comparable to try to stick this next to the 50-140. They're not meant for the same things. They're just not. The focal range is different. That lens is a lot faster, of course. It's huge, it's heavy. It does have fast autofocus, but this is definitely faster. So it's not really worth it to try to compare the two. They are not meant for the same things, even though there is some overlap. Autofocus acquisition on the 70-300 is incredibly fast. Like I said, it's easily the second fastest after the 200mm f2 Fujifilm lens, which I also happen to have. This is easily the best travel and sports action lens that Fujifilm makes. And hold on a second, this review is going to be somewhat short. I'm getting close to the conclusions here if you felt like I've talked too much. Best lightweight sports action telephoto lens that I've ever used. Let me repeat that again because I actually mean that. It's a bold statement. And people crucify me if I make a bold statement about a lens without being accurate, logical, empirical and analytical, especially when it comes to spending someone else's money. And I actually take that responsibility seriously. The best lightweight sports action telephoto lens I've ever used. That's the reason why I've actually been out a lot. Like I said, took it to the farm, been out all day today with it, and yesterday, day before. Tested the hell out of the lens. Looking at it, all of us are not extreme fans. When it comes to 70-300 though, you can't build internal autofocus. Even Olympus hasn't done that. That doesn't extend some. Superficially, looking at the lens, it's like, well, it's not that fast. It's a 4 to 5.6, 70-300. I've used 70-300s for decades now from other manufacturers. Ho-hum. And maybe like you, I myself also took that superficial belief before using this lens and making, conclusions based upon extensive use of this lens and testing. And it's not that at all. So this is easily the best lightweight sports action telephoto lens I've ever used, and I mean that. Combined with the 16-80, this and the 70-300 right here are the perfect travel pair. I take actually that would be it, 16-80 and the 70-300. Fujifilm did need a much better telephoto range, 70-300. People have been begging for it, and Fujifilm knew they had to make it for sports action, travel, and wildlife. The 55-200 just didn't cut it for that focal range, nor the autofocus speed required, even though it's a perfectly great lens. I have that lens. 100-400 is huge. I don't like the lens. The 50-140 is a different in-use lens that doesn't cut it either. It's a lot huger. It's not for hardcore sports action wildlife, even though it's perfectly adequate for that. It definitely is. This is faster in autofocus, by the way, than the 50-140. It's not the same end-use intention lens. It's not designed for what this lens is designed for. So Fujifilm knew for years, and I was hoping for it, that they'd have to make a 70-300. I humorously call this the official squirrels on crack rated lens. I did a lot of shooting out at the skate park today. A lot of shooting. I filled up two 64 gig cards, and hit rate was incredibly high. Incredibly higher than the 50-140 or that of the 55-200. That's not my opinion. It is a fact. It is. Conclusions on this, the 70-300. To me, this is the top 5 must-have Fujifilm X-mount lenses. And of course, it depends on what you shoot and what you like to photograph. To me, that top 5 is the 16-80, 16mm 1.4, the 80mm macro. I'm a huge macro fan, so you may not be. And, the 8-16mm. And maybe, possibly, instead of that, the 35-1.4. Once again, it depends on what you shoot, but easily top 5 must-have. I actually might personally, just me personally, consider this to be a top 3 must-own Fujifilm lens. My other top 2 would be like the 16-1.4, and I'm just such a huge macro fan. My choice would be the 80mm macro. But if I weren't such a huge macro fan, then top 3 must-owns, the 16-80, this the 70-300, and the 16-1.4, 16mm f1.4. I give this lens a 10 out of 10. I actually found it shocking. I was planning on doing an eye roll of boredom, and I didn't know. I had an open mind in testing it. I've just, I've had my hands on a lot of 70-300mm lenses. I think I have 6 currently by other manufacturers. most of which are Nikkors. And I wasn't expecting to be shocked by this lens, but I was. It renders really nice. I don't know why that other website, I won't mention the name, didn't like the bokeh. This is not a portrait lens. That's not really a concern. But actually the bokeh on this, if you're doing like, say a 300mm shot of a bird in a tree, for example, the out-of-focus elements are actually incredibly nice. Nice cotton candy bokeh on this lens. So yes, I do give this lens a 10 out of 10. And it's easily, as an owner of every Fujifilm X-mount lens except for the 18mm, I easily place this as top 5 must-own Fujifilm X-mount lenses, easily, possibly even top 3. For compact travel or sports action wildlife, oh my God, this is a great lens. It really is. Like I said, I've been out with it, so I only needed like a couple days out with it, but I've took 5 days of outings with it because I so enjoyed using it. You know, a good lens, you use it once or twice and test it, and you're like, okay, I'm done with it. A great lens, you know, where you have such a high hit rate and it's such a pleasure to use, and you just keep taking it out day after day. It's kind of like the butter and bread lens that you kind of leave glued on your camera. This is that. And so, highest of praise for the 70-300mm Fujifilm lens. Once again, I post no affiliate links. I don't work for Fujifilm. You know, whatever you buy, I don't make a dime. So I hope you like this review because I mean it seriously. I take lens reviews seriously. And if you get it, you'll be extremely happy with it. Oh yeah, by the way, here's the lens hood. Oh, one thing of important note, I didn't put it here on my list of things to mention. I appreciate the fact, even though it's not glass-filled nylon, glass or nylon-filled plastic, I appreciate that Fujifilm did beef up their lens mounts on the split base for mounting them onto the lens. So this is not a lens hood, unless someone does something extremely stupid, that anybody is going to break. The 50-140 and the 18-135 and several of other Fujifilm lenses, so you could break it looking at it, you know, strangely. And I'm really careful with my gear, but this is not a lens hood that anybody's going to break easily. So Fujifilm must have been listening to me, I hope, because I've been preaching that for years now, about them improving the fragility, the extreme fragility of their lens hoods, and so they have fixed that, at least on this lens. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and wait for it. Fujifilm. This is a great lens. Thanks. Superficially, though, it doesn't look it. You're like, okay, whatever, you know. It's not. It's great. It's really a great lens. Goodbye.